All right, guys, thank you for that carrier update. As always, right now we're going to welcome our next live guest. We've got Patrick Berglund, who's CEO and co-founder of Zanetta, continuing this conversation about carrier relationships. And it's good. We've got a central theme for today. So, Patrick, thank you for joining us today. We're going to touch a little bit on picking the right carrier. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Katie and Michael.
Excellent. So, Patrick, let's talk about Zanetta. What exactly does Zanetta do? Let's give the audience a little context here before we jump into the issue at hand.
Yeah, so Zanetta collects freight rate data from primarily the shipper and BCO side on ocean freight and air freight. And we aggregate that data and provide market intelligence back to the same audience.
And having that data can be kind of the difference in having the upper hand between making the right decisions and making the wrong decisions when you're talking about choosing a carrier that's right for your business. Can you talk a little bit about that as a whole, picking the right person, what it takes, and how having that data can help you make those choices?
Yeah, I think that this data is essential because the market is so volatile. It moves so fast that without this data, you don't have a clear handle on how the different trades around the world move. Think about like Shanghai to Santos in Brazil, or export out of the US into China. It's all directions, and at any given time, prices move up and down with different percentages. And just not having this data available and sitting down at the negotiation table with your supplier leaves you completely in the dark, right? So this is what we do. We provide full visibility on a global scale to BCOs and shippers. And this really shifts some of that information asymmetry into being advantage for the buyer, for the customer. And as we headed into COVID, everybody talked about how squeezed the market were and how important these relationships would be in order to secure supply. And this is the perfect example of how you need this data to be coupled to those conversations, making sure that you don't leave money on the table.
Absolutely. And Patrick, I would imagine that the core business of those carriers needs to be discovered and where their, allegiances lie when you're selecting those according to the industry you're in. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I think there's been a period now where there's been so much uncertainty, and the carriers have chosen very different strategies. Like you can have the Israeli shipping line, CM line, going more and more for spot market relationships and shorter rate durations, while the Danish player Maersk, the biggest shipping line arguably together with the Mediterranean Shipping Company, has gone in the completely opposite direction. And then it becomes a choice for the BCOs, how they think about it, the market being on historically sort of elevated levels. Is this the time to go long, or should you play in the spot market? And it's been 24 months, I'd say, or even longer, 30 months now of a constant sort of flux and battle to figure out where is the market heading and where should I position myself and which suppliers can secure supply versus the cost levels that I need to commit to for how long.
I think we talk a lot about in this industry is trial under pressure or trial by fire, right? In the last, as you mentioned, 24, 30 months have been this intense pressure on every single aspect of our supply chain. And I think it's really shown who in the players kind of get it and who the players in the industry that really don't. Can you talk about how this pressure the last 30 months or so has set up those people who were successful now to go into the future, looking at this market downturn and saying, we've ridden this high for so long, but now we're going into a downturn. But we understand how to handle it because we've gotten used to this volatility over the last 2 years.
Yeah, I think it is an incredibly interesting topic. I think the most savvy and most sophisticated BCOs has really shifted their point of view of supply chain as a whole being almost a commodity or into something that you can gain a competitive advantage for. And this has led to the entire C-suite team sort of putting their eyes on transportation and logistics, supply chain as a broader topic. And we've gone from like a very transactional, simple approach to transportation to contingency planning, multi-sourcing, massive budget challenges, and how do you plan and adapt for a fast-moving market to thinking about time to market. When do you buy? When do you go long versus short? How do you think about securing supply versus cost? And And all of this has been massively important topics in this shift from historically being a buyer's market into a seller's market. And the best businesses, they've taken, if not all of these things, but a lot of these things into heart and built it in to the operations of the company.
So, Patrick, give us a few tips as to how to build out a good playbook moving forward in selecting a good carrier for your business.
Well, I think now is the time you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, for sure. And I'm not here to say which shipping line is better than the next. I think it's you got to prepare for alternatives, because if it's one thing we've learned over the last 30 months is that nothing is stable. Everything is unstable, and there will be more curveballs, whether it's lockdowns in China, whether it's more geopolitical turmoil, and we're seeing inflation rates on the rise and interest rates as well. So if consumer spending shifts quickly now, what I would recommend when it comes to securing the relationships with your suppliers is flexibility. Make sure there's multiple suppliers in the mix, and we're talking larger volume players here, not the smaller mom and pop shops. But for those big importers and exporters, make sure there's plenty of alternatives to play with, because I'm quite sure we will be heading into more difficult times going forward now.
Patrick, on the flip side of that, do you think that there's ever a risk of spreading yourself too thinly across too many providers? Or do you think that it's all about just understanding your risk level and understanding where you sit comfortably and how spread out that you can be?
Yeah, that's a very important point, Kaylee. You don't want to be an insignificant customer of your supplier, right? So make sure you allocate it with some level of spend that's attractive for the supplier. Right, so whether you work through the forwarders or directly with the carriers, make sure that you understand which trades are in their interest and which volume would make a difference, and then split it. So I'm not saying split it on 10, but think about 2, 3.
So, Patrick, what everybody's talking about right now, or kind of trying to predict right now, is what is going to occur as Shanghai opens up coming into the United States. Do you have any insights into that?
Yeah, it's interesting. We hosted a webinar on Tuesday where we had tens of billions of dollars on the BCO side live joining our webinar, and we quizzed them exactly about that, because our hypothesis is that there isn't a substantial buildup of volumes going out of Shanghai, so there won't be a massive capacity squeeze. But more than 70% of our audience, which they have production in China and so forth, they actually anticipate the market to rise again. So I think it's an interesting thing to keep an eye on really what's going to be the outcome now that Shanghai is opening up again.
Sounds like more of a slow rising tide than this massive quick tidal wave. Would you kind of characterize it that way?
Yeah, I'd say with this level of uncertainty, the whole idea of just in case supply chains rather than just in time still is the mantra.
Gotcha.
Got it.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Patrick. You have a wonderful day. Always insightful. Hopefully we get to talk to you again very, very soon. You have a blessed day.
Good to see you. Take care.
All right, we're going to head over to Sydney Edwards right now. We've got our next look at our headlines for your morning.